that she was good to go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order and stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have any comments from the public? Seeing none, let's move on. Do we have any corrections to the agenda?
We do have, it's been requested to pull consent item 4A to action item 5A, and that is the liability claim against South Tahoe Public Utility District received from Tahoe Paradise Recreation and Park District.
Okay. Any others, board members? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Up second. Motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Let's go to item 5A. This is the Paradise Park item. Who's going to take this one?
I will take
Okay.
this one. Good afternoon, Board. Brian Lee, Customer Service Manager. And yeah, so item 5A is related to a liability claim that we received from Tahoe Paradise Park. So I'll give you a little bit of background on this and then some context as to the requested or recommended staff action. So back in the middle of August, we received a timely claim from the Tahoe Paradise Park related to some work that was done back on July 9th. So the project that was going on out there is a county project, and it's related to installing new storm drain infrastructure out in this the area surrounding Tahoe Paradise Park and Myers, kind of around the Myers Elementary School. So the district had inspection staff on site for this portion of the work, and it did require a mainline shutdown on the water system because the county needed to relocate one of the district's water mains due to a conflict with the proposed location of their storm drain infrastructure. So we were aware of this. The county included it in their contract, and we had our staff on site witnessing the work that was done on the district assets. So once the water was recharged, the Tahoe Paradise Park noticed the next day that they had a leak on their service line just downstream of the meter. So it was on the customer side of the service, but within 2 feet of the meter or so. And it was a pretty decent sized leak. So according to Water Smart, it was going about 165 gallons an hour. So the park hired a plumber. They promptly came out and fixed that and took care of the leak. And then they filed a claim with the district on the basis that they were arguing that the water recharge, when we recharged the main line, that caused a pressure fluctuation in their service line that resulted in the water leak on their service. So when I received the claim, I forwarded that to JPIA, as we always do. They are our liability insurance provider. And the JPIA reviewed the claim and made a recommendation that the district reject the claim on the grounds that we have no legal liability for this leak based on a section of our administrative code. So that's section 3.1.2, and it's a long-standing section of the code. It was put in place in the original admin code back in 1974, Ordinance 250, with basically that the language has remained unchanged since then, and it says that the district will exercise reasonable care and diligence to deliver to its customers a continuous and sufficient supply of potable water at a proper pressure and to avoid shortages or interruptions in service. The district, however, shall not be liable for interruptions, shortages, or insufficient supplies, fluctuations, or variations in pressure, or any related losses or damage. So part of the recommendation that we give to the JPIA, we get an incident report from our staff, and when I see a claim like this, the first question that I'm asking staff is, what went on out there? But the other question I'm asking them is, did anything go on that was outside of our normal protocols for recharging that main line? So the district staff is well versed in how to recharge those pipes slowly to avoid water hammer damage. We also open downstream hydrants to allow air pressure to escape the lines. And the reason that we do that is not only to protect the customer side plumbing, but also the district side. one of the problems that we've had with some of our aging infrastructure is that these water shutdowns, when we recharge a main line, we'll pop a leak somewhere else in the main line or on the district side of the service. So we're always very mindful of, exercising the proper protocols in every instance that we do this. And water shutdowns are a routine part of operating our water system, whether it's for capital work, planned shutdowns, or unplanned shutdowns related to a water leak that needs to be repaired on an emergency basis. So, given that information, the JPIA has made the recommendation to reject this claim based on, the administrative code stating that the district is not going to be liable for damage related to changes in pressure, and the field reports that we have from multiple staff members saying that they have followed all of the proper protocols. So nothing was out of the ordinary with this shutdown. We did receive a letter from the Tahoe Paradise Park chairman of the board that they requested be read aloud at the board meeting here today. So I'd like to read that and then give you a little bit more context based on some of the things that were in the letter. I can kind of shed some light on some of the things that they mentioned. So I'll read that now unless the board has any questions at this point. Okay. This is a letter from Zane Graham, the chairman of the board of directors of Tahoe Paradise Park. Dear board members, thank you for taking the time to consider our appeal. We would like to reiterate the reasons why we believe our claim is valid. On July 9th, 2024, Tahoe Paradise Park received notice of a water shutdown. That evening, at approximately 6 p.m., we inspected the site to understand why the water had not been restored. During our visit, we observed a heated debate among the workers who were working overtime. The water was eventually restored between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. The following morning, on July 10th, a bubbling leak was discovered above our main connection. Witnesses to this incident include Joe Cardinale, Zane Graham, chairman of the board of Paradise Park, and Judy Klott, board director. According to data from your own STPUD leak tracking, starting on July 10th, the day after the water was restored, we experienced a leak of 165 gallons per hour. I spoke with Matthew Mendoza, who informed me that the team involved in the project at the corner of Bakersfield and East San Bernardino had been terminated. The damage was repaired by All Plumbing at a cost of $3,584.05. Their notes indicate that the damage was likely caused by high water pressure when the main was turned back on. We understand the policy of 3.1.2 of the District Administrative Code, but such a code does not prevent mistakes from happening, especially in an environment where they were running overtime and where personnel were let go. We believe the evidence clearly indicates that the damage was caused by the water being turned back on July 9th. As a small community park funded by the community, we have a limited budget to address such damages. We kindly request compensation for the repair costs. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Zane Graham, chairman of the board. So, I wanted to give you some context as far as some of the things that they mentioned about they mentioned overhearing some arguments between staff out there. And so I got a lot more information on this from Matt Mendoza, who was our inspector on site, and Frank Abendondolo, who is our water supervisor. He was also on site. So this was a planned shutdown. Water was supposed to be and expected to be restored by 5 to 6 p.m. So that's what was put on the notices that went out there. However, the work did not go according to schedule. And so they are accurate in saying that the water was restored sometime around 9 p.m. Matt also verified that there was argumentation amongst the contractor crew out there, and this is the contractor that the county hired to do this work on the district's assets, and he was present for that and stated that the problem that they had is that they were behind schedule, the work was going more slowly than they expected, and that they had some issues. So during this work, they had recharged the line 3 times, but I want to be clear that the multiple recharges did not affect the park because the main line feeding the park was valved off. So until we were sure that the new pipe that this contractor installed was holding water and was functioning correctly, we didn't want anybody downstream to be impacted by potentially multiple shutdowns. So we had the entire main line valved off that served the park. But Matt did say that they had to turn the water on and off 3 times in order to fix leaks in the new pipe that they installed. Sounded like they had some problems with one of the gaskets and some of the bolts leaking. And so they were frustrated by that. And, Matt also stated that the contractor was kind of disorganized and that there was a lack of communication amongst their own crew. The letter from the Tahoe Paradise Board states that personnel was fired. So I clarified that with Matt, and he said that that may have been a misunderstanding, he thought, of something that he had said to them out in the field that night, but nobody was fired. But what did happen is that the county had contracted with this particular contractor, MKD, to do this portion of the work, and once they completed that project on July 9th, the district there was another section of work that came up at a later time that happened about a month later in August, and the county asked us if we wanted that same contractor to do the work or a different contractor. And based on what we had seen, during this phase of the project, we did request that another contractor do the second phase of the work. The county obliged that, and there were no issues with that portion. So there were some problems on the contractor side, but based on my understanding and the field reports from our staff, it didn't have any bearing on how the water shutoff was handled. Basically, the multiple recharges did not affect this customer, and we followed all protocols in the final recharge that restored water to the park, including opening their 2 hydrants, one kind of right at the entrance to the park and one downstream at the end of that main line before it kind of crosses under the river to the other side of East San Bernardino. And we opened both of those hydrants before recharging to make sure that the air had a place to go. We opened hose bibs at different properties to try to alleviate any pressure. So with that, the district, the way that I see these claims is, I think that the leak on their service line probably is related to restoring water to that pipe. Pressure fluctuations can cause these problems, but the district has had a long-standing policy of rejecting similar claims in the past. So we've had quite a few of these. It comes up, like I said, since doing these shutdowns is such a routine part of the work that we do. What we see is that every once in a while, and it's usually in a shutdown that affects, 100 people, we may see one of these where there's a leak that pops up on somebody's service. And the district has always rejected these claims in the past on the basis of this section of the administrative code. And so, as the customer service manager, I'm absolutely sympathetic to the park and to their funding concerns, as well as the argument that the leak was related to the work that was done out there. I think it almost certainly in this case was, because it happened right following that. But I did reach out to the JPIA to ask them about this language that we have in the code. Basically, have they seen this before? Is this standard? They said that this is absolutely industry standard and is considered the best practice. So they said all of their clients have the same language in their code. And the basis for this, because I wanted to understand, what is the reasoning behind it? And the thinking is that normal plumbing, or, plumbing that's in good shape and working condition, it should be able to withstand these kinds of routine, mainline shutdowns and recharges, apart from something that's done out of the ordinary where there's really serious water hammer. And so what we see is that it's so rare and it just happens, on an individual basis. I believe that's related to just the age of the plumbing that's out there in the community. The district is seeing that with our assets, but I know a lot of homeowners are, experiencing the side effects of aging plumbing as well. And so that was the thinking behind it, as well as just the, as the community plumbing infrastructure continues to age, we will probably see more of this. We have seen it on our system. Like I said, these pressure fluctuations pop leaks in our system all the time. So our water crew knows there are certain high pressure areas that are really problematic. So that is the basis of where this language came from. And the idea is that there's potentially a lot of liability out there for the district if we accept liability for these leaks, as the infrastructure continues to age. And I think what we've done, I think, with this language is weigh the interests of an individual customer like this against the interests of the district as a whole, which is essentially comprised of all of its customers. And so there may be potential liability. JPIA also cautioned us against setting a precedent or treating certain customers differently, and they said that we should be applying the rules consistently was their recommendation. and without any reason to treat this case differently. And like I said, that is the first place that I go with these, is to try to determine whether there was anything out of the ordinary that was done that would change the equation here. And if that was the case, I think the district should take liability. But in this case, it does sound like all of our protocols were followed, and that there was nothing that really set this apart from the other claims that we had rejected in the past. They all had their individual circumstances, but it was the same idea that restoring water to a decharged main caused a pressure difference that broke something on the customer side. With that, the staff recommendation is to accept the JPIA's recommendation and reject this claim to be consistent with how we've handled these in the past, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Any questions? I don't think so. Let me just ask if there's anybody from the public that wants to speak to this. No? Yep. Yeah, I hear you, Ryan. I mean, it's just the nature of the client is the only thing in question here, and you know, we've got a long-standing record of rejecting these things, and it really is a can of worms to start picking up leaks on the customer side. So I'm going to move staff recommendation to reject the claim.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Thank you, Ryan. Okay, let's go to item 6, presentation. Julie.
Good afternoon, board. Julie Ryan, Engineering Department Manager. I'm here with Elisa Garvey today. She is our project manager from Carollo, who has been working with us over the last, has it been 3 years? Yeah, on the Recycled Water Strategic Plan, with its focus on our operations at Diamond Valley Ranch. She is here today to present to you all the results of TM3. This was the alternatives evaluation in advance of us moving into the final phase of the project, the development of the draft final report, which will be accompanied by a presentation to the public and the strategic advisory group. So with that, Elisa.
Okay, so thanks so much, and thanks for your time today. So my presentation, I'm going to provide an overview of the Recycled Water Strategic Plan process, where we are up to where we are today. I'll review the alternatives evaluation, which, as Julia mentioned, really is the crux of TM3, and that's the content of TM3. That consists of 8 alternatives plus the existing system, plus 5 system modifications that were evaluated. We'll talk about the decision analysis and the decision diagram and multi-criteria analysis tools, and then I'll talk about next steps. Okay, so very quickly on an overview, let's just go back in time here. As Julie mentioned, we started in the fall of 2021. Throughout this process, we have developed a number of deliverables along the way. So you can see those in turquoise, right? That we did technical memo 1, which is legal and regulatory, technical memo 2, which is an alternatives identification and screening, and tech memo 3, which is the alternatives evaluation, which at this point has been delivered to the district project team, and they've provided comments on that. And we've developed a final draft version of that in response to their comments. Along the way, you can see that we've had meetings with the stakeholder advisory group and the public. And so the next steps, we will move into the development of the Recycled Water Strategic Plan. One thing that I wanted to mention is that the analysis has been completed. The analysis is comprised of what's been prepared in tech memos 1, 2, and 3. Those will sit as appendices to the Recycled Water Strategic Plan, and there will be an upfront executive summary and plan document. Okay, so the alternatives evaluation process, just to go back to where we started. We started with the existing system plus 16 alternatives, right? This is the content of TM2. We conducted a screening analysis, and that was in part based on the legal and regulatory analysis, and also a preliminary level analysis of each of these alternatives. And that process is documented in TM2, the alternatives identification and screening. So out of that screening process, we had 6 alternatives that really rose to the top as the most feasible and the most promising alternatives, 6 plus the existing. Right? We moved ahead with further evaluation of those alternatives, and in the process, we had additional stakeholder input, some one-on-one meetings with specific agencies, and 2 more alternatives were developed. So we moved into the evaluation process with 8 alternatives plus the existing, so plus a total of 9. And in the evaluation process, we dug deeper into these alternatives, developed information including a more refined description of those alternatives. We evaluated the regulatory processes and permits that would be required, and we developed preliminary cost estimates. And then we also developed a multi-criteria decision analysis and a decision diagram, which I'll talk more in later, as tools to help with that decision-making process. But that multi-criteria analysis allowed us to rank the alternatives, those 9 alternatives, sort of top to bottom, relative to each other. So the end result here, I'm giving you the final result of TM3, is that we looked at these alternatives under 2 different scenarios. We looked at the scenario of saying, let's make the hypothesis that the existing rancher contracts are continued and there is sufficient recycled water demand for the water that is produced, right? And if that is the scenario, then alternative 1, which is the existing system, rose to the top as the best alternative for the district. We also proposed a hypothetical scenario that the existing rancher contracts were not maintained into the future, such that the supply of recycled water exceeded the available capacity or use of that recycled water. And in that case, the alternative that rose to the top was alternative 2, which is to expand reuse in Alpine County with the existing level of treatment. So secondary Q3 treatment, but looking at alternative locations within Alpine County to use that recycled water. Okay, so stepping back to how we got there, I'll describe these alternatives in a little bit more detail. So as I mentioned, as we walked through from the screening and into the evaluation, we ended up with 9 alternatives, one of those being the existing condition. So the other alternatives here that you're showing, you can see on this slide, you can see alternative 1, the existing system. Alternative 2 is expanded disinfected secondary reuse in Alpine County. Alternative 3 is a higher level of treatment to get to disinfected tertiary reuse and applying that in Alpine County. Alternative 4, and I'm going to lump 4, 6A, and 6B together a little bit. They all involve discharge to a surface water and then subsequent downstream use of that recycled water that is discharged. So alternative 4, we evaluated discharge to the West Fork of Carson. Alternative 6A was discharge to Indian Creek, and alternative 6B was discharge to Mud Lake. Alternative 6C is taking the existing secondary effluent, conveying that into Nevada as a source for potable reuse. And alternative 6D is taking the secondary effluent potentially to a higher level of treatment and doing non-potable reuse in Nevada via direct delivery, so pipeline direct delivery into Nevada for reuse. And then finally, alternative 7A is the alternative where the recycled water would be conveyed from the district wastewater treatment plant to Douglas County's export pipeline, combined with Douglas County's effluent or recycled water, and then used in Carson Valley for non-potable reuse. Okay, so I'm shading out alternatives 4, 6A, 6B, and 6C. And the reason why I've shaded these out is I'm not going to talk specifically about them in this presentation. I have all the information that I'm presenting on the other alternatives for those alternatives if anyone has questions on those. But those are the alternatives among this group that have the least amount of certainty in terms of the potential interest in the recycled water and the least amount of certainty with respect to the regulatory process to make those happen. So I'm focusing today on alternatives 1, 2, and 3, 6D, and 7A. Okay, so I'm going to walk through each of these alternatives briefly, and starting with, I'm not going to start with alternative 1 because that's the existing system, so I'll start with alternative 2. And so this is expanded disinfected secondary 2-3 water in Alpine County. And in this case, we are looking at the same level of treatment, the export pipeline up and over Luther Pass to Harvey Place Reservoir, and it would also involve the district's irrigation in DVR, as well as looking at other parcels to do secondary effluent, irrigation with secondary effluent. Similar to what's being done now, just different locations. So the implementation, the trigger to implement this alternative would be that there would be, for some reason, some insufficient recycled water capacity such that you had a demand and capacity imbalance. You had more, a production and capacity imbalance. You had more recycled water, but you didn't have the capacity for reuse of all of that recycled water. So you can see on this slide, the purple parcels are potential parcels where additional effluent could be used. It would also involve an expansion of the district's operations at DVR, at the district irrigation operations, as well as potential parcels owned by Washer Tribe. So this mapping just shows a concept for parcels that would have potential interest in recycled water. You can see that these add up to, a little over about 5,000 acre-feet a year. The key components is that we would be expanding the DVR operations, the district operations of DVR, and developing a distribution system to those new users, which may require maybe ditches or it may be pipelines. So as part of the alternatives evaluation in TM3, we looked at, for each alternative, the regulations and permits that would be required, and we categorized them into low, medium, and high. I have one of these slides for each of these alternatives, but I'm only showing it to you for this one. I want the board to know that we did this analysis, and what this analysis helped us do was, in the ranking of these alternatives, we were evaluating one piece of that ranking, one criteria was the regulatory complexity, right? And we used this detailed analysis to have an assessment of, which of these alternatives are more complex with respect to obtaining regulatory approvals and permits for implementation. So that was the analysis that was completed for each of these alternatives. Okay, so alternative 3 is expanding disinfected tertiary reuse in Alpine County. So this alternative is similar to alternative 2, but it involves taking that recycled water to a higher level of treatment. So additional treatment at the treatment facility to meet disinfected tertiary requirements in California that allows you to irrigate areas such as parks or food crops or other, landscape, urban irrigation. And you would implement this alternative if there was insufficient recycled water capacity, or there was a higher level of recycled water quality required for some reason. Maybe it's a regulatory requirement from Wuhan. So in this case, we would be looking at expanding reuse in Alpine County, and it turns out that there are not that many parcels that would demand this level of recycled water, right? So you don't gain a whole lot of capacity by going to that higher level of treatment, right? So there's a few here you can see it's 79 acre-feet a year. It's not that much additional capacity. However, this level of water would clearly be able to be used on the parcels that are currently using disinfectant secondary 2-3 or any other parcel of similar recycled water use. So it's sort of all the capacity of alternative 2 plus a little bit of additional capacity associated with this higher level of recycled water quality. Okay, so it would require treatment modifications to meet Title 22 unrestricted reuse. It would also require distribution system to new users. Okay. Alternative 6D is extended reuse in Nevada via direct delivery. In this alternative, the same export system would be in place and be used. And in this case, there would be conveyance from the DVR area across the state line to parcels for agricultural ranch land or agricultural pasture land irrigation in Nevada, so direct delivery to these parcels. And you would implement this alternative if there was, again, insufficient recycled water capacity for the amount of recycled water that's being produced. And if there was some driver that required the end use of recycled water to not be located in Alpine County. So in this alternative, the map here on the right shows that long conveyance line, that purple conveyance line, up to some areas just over the California-Nevada border. And there's two primary areas that we looked at, sort of the area west of State Route 88 and south of Centerville Lane, and then also the Benton Lake properties. You can see here by those numbers, there's a significant amount of demand in that area for non-potable recycled water, at least potential demand for non-potable recycled water. The key components would be upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant to meet what we anticipate nutrient limits that would be imposed by NDEP. A conveyance pipeline to Nevada to those users, and then the distribution system then from that main conveyance line to the specific users of that recycled water. Okay, alternative 7A is the conveyance to DCL-TSA with reuse in Nevada. This alternative is the one that is different from the others that doesn't use the existing export pipeline, right? So we'd be taking water from the district's wastewater treatment plant, conveying that to a point on the DCL-TSA export pipeline, and then having that water being conveyed down the hill and used in Carson Valley in a number of locations. So the implementation triggers for this alternative would be, again, an insufficient recycled water capacity, and possibly if there was a need that that the end use of recycled water could not be used in Alpine County, from driver to be out of Alpine County. So, so this alternative involves, again, that conveyance to DCL-TSA and connection to their pipeline, unfortunately, pretty far over into, up over Kingsbury grade. So the connection is really just, just below the peak of Kingsbury grade, and that's based on the available capacity of their pipeline. And so in that situation, once that water is combined, then there are a number of different landowners that have been identified as potentially interested or potential users of that recycled water of the similar quality to what's being produced today. So there's 3 potential users that were identified by DCL-TSA. You can see there's a high amount of potential recycled water capacity. The key components of this alternative would be wastewater treatment plant modifications to do nutrient removal, and that would be required to meet the DCL-TSA's existing permit, right, through NDEP. The conveyance pipeline from the district to Kingsbury grade, and then finally the distribution system to new users. Excuse me. Okay. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the cost estimates for these alternatives. I've listed them here, all of them, including the ones that I didn't discuss in detail today, but you can see alternatives are listed from 1 through 7A, the capital cost as estimates, and the O&M costs. This information was used in that multi-criteria analysis to to evaluate these alternatives and rank these alternatives relative to each other. I'm going to move on here, so that's the summary of the alternatives. We also looked at what we called system modifications. And we identified system modifications were characterized in that respect because they were ideas and concepts that could be incorporated into various alternatives, but didn't provide a standalone end use of recycled water. So we looked at things as part of TM3. We looked at developing a network of urban fire protection. We looked at tunneling as an infrastructure approach in terms of the main concept that we looked at was, could tunneling provide relief, or could tunneling provide the potential opportunity to not do so much pumping, you know, to reduce that pumping energy demand over Luther Pass. We also looked at split treatment, so taking that wastewater treatment process and putting part of that process in different locations, DVR being one location, so splitting the treatment process. We also looked at constructed wetlands and export system energy recovery. So the first two system modifications, urban fire protection and tunneling, those were eliminated, and then the rationale for eliminating those is discussed in TM3, that it's really based on technical and economic challenges with those two options. The split treatment, we actually have incorporated that into alternative 3. I didn't go through that in detail, but there would be an opportunity to split that treatment. That's the tertiary effluent alternative, and split some of that treatment between the wastewater treatment plant and DVR. And then alternative 6C is by definition split treatment, because we are talking about producing secondary effluent, but then doing the potable reuse piece in Nevada. So that would be a split treatment configuration as well. So I'm going to talk briefly about the constructed wetlands. The constructed wetlands, this was a concept that could be added to a number of alternatives. Any alternative, so almost all of them, with the exception of the one that goes to 7A to DCL TSA, that involves the conveyance of recycled water up and over and into Harvey Place Reservoir. So the idea with constructed wetlands primarily was, could wetlands provide some additional capacity for recycled water storage? Secondarily, could wetlands provide polishing or habitat or other ecological benefits, mitigation bank, other benefits that could be developed by implementing wetlands? So the concept here is that we identified that there's approximately 30 acres of area that would require some additional analysis to look at the regulatory feasibility of this, but there's potential that there's about 30 acres that could provide additional storage capacity. And the idea would be is that that wetland area could be developed. It could be developed such that it could be inundated in certain periods under certain hydrologic conditions by about 6 feet, and that would provide about 180 acre-feet of additional temporary storage. Now, that's not a lot, but it could be critical when you think about that time period where you're not allowed to release water to Diamond Ditch, right? So in a scenario where you're up against that time period, that additional 180 acre-feet of storage could provide about an additional 10 days, right, of storage before, and just give you some more buffer room in terms of decision making on releasing outside of your allowable period, or making it through that period and then releasing when that's allowed. Okay, and then the next system modification is energy recovery. We looked at energy recovery for the DCL TSA alternatives, or 7A, and then we also, which I'm not going to talk about, but I have information about it, very similar to what we did for the district export line. So we looked at DCL TSA, and then we looked at the existing export line as the potential for energy recovery. We looked at two configurations, and one was an energy recovery system, single, one located, in DVR area, and then the other option was looking at multiple energy recovery systems, basically from the bottom of the hill up up the sea line towards Luther Pass. And you can see here on the right-hand side is that those vary a little bit with respect to the amount of energy recovery, and they vary significantly with respect to cost. The first option here, option A, which is the energy recovery system at the base of the sea line, requires a significant upgrade to the material of the sea line from Luther Pass down to DVR to be able to handle the pressure that would be generated by if you only had one energy recovery system at the bottom, right? It's efficient in terms of energy recovery, but it does require a significant upgrade to the pipeline to handle those pressures. Okay, so in conclusion here, we get to the decision analysis approach and tools. We developed a decision analysis and which consists of a decision diagram and a multi-criteria analysis. The idea here is that the decision diagram helps the district sort through, I have some trigger, I have some anticipated constraint or opportunity. What options, what alternatives would be appropriate in response to that trigger or constraint? So that's where you get to on the decision diagram. And then the multi-criteria analysis is used to then look at those alternatives, how do they rank amongst each other, and which is the best option for the district. So there are tools here in the Recycled Water Strategic Plan that can be used now and into the future as various constraints and opportunities arise. And findings, these really go back to where I started, and that is that we looked at two different scenarios. One was sufficient recycled water capacity, and that landed with the existing system, alternative 1. And we looked at scenario 2, was insufficient recycled water capacity, and that analysis landed at alternative 2, which is expanded secondary Q3 recycled water in Alpine County. Our next steps, I'm back to the schedule here. We have delivered TM3, and that's been reviewed by the project team. We're actually delivering the administrative draft of the Recycled Water Strategic Plan to the district project team today. Beyond that, we will have a move from the administrative draft to a draft based on comments, and that'll be available for public and stakeholder advisory group review and a presentation on the strategic plan. As we move into November, December, we're looking towards board approval and the final Recycled Water Strategic Plan. Any questions?
Expanded secondary 23. What is that treatment compared to what we have?
It's exact same treatment. No change in the treatment.
Yeah, but what are you adding on? What processes you get added on?
There would not be any processes added on.
Oh, it's the same as what we have.
It's the same as what you're doing now.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you go back to the slide on the finding of the costs?
Sure.
Maybe that is related because you have an existing, and then second one, number 2, no O&M costs. Is that assuming the $5.5 million as a base operating cost?
Yes, so that's a good point. So there is the existing system. We didn't have any capital costs. We were reporting the O&M costs, and then these other alternatives are all additive to that. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
I mean, my just kind of overarching thoughts, great job. We've kind of followed this through over, several years now. I mean, agree with your recommendations, I think, fundamentally. Yeah, I think I'll just probably leave it there. These other price tags are the extreme for many different ways. And honestly, they're not feasible. I would figure out a way to use the water, and that the district would, through different means, before we would go through any of these more pricey items. And so that would be my suggestion, is that if any of those were to be triggered, our solution would be, how do we use the water ourselves, or, you know what I'm saying, through ownership, acquisition of additional lands, and so forth. We're going to be growing more alfalfa conceivably, because those are all not viable options.
Yeah, the wetland addition that you showed on there, does that consume any water? or just store water?
It really just detains and stores, yes. Yeah, I mean, I guess there is some consumptive use through those, being as a plant growth, but it's minor relative to the flows that you're talking about. Yeah, in that acreage. Yeah. So,
I'm not sure if you got into this, but in terms of the current ranchers that are accepting our water, is that part of the conversation? I guess for me, like, this is a lot of material to take in all at once, and for me, I need to absorb quite a bit. There's a lot of information provided and synthesized into like just a nice little nugget here. But I'm just curious, like, to what extent have we explored and understand, I guess, the likelihood of these folks that continue to receive our waters?
Yeah, so it's a good point, and I'm glad you made it, because that really gets back to the heart of why we started down this process 3 years ago, is anticipating that those rancher contracts are coming to their expiration date here in a couple of years. What is it, 28?
2028.
Yeah. And so we wanted to be prepared as we start to open conversations with them about their continued interest in being our partners out there with, what are our options for alternatives. So I think we're right on schedule to, have this ready for opening those discussions, but we haven't yet, correct?
No, we haven't. That's going to be a challenge of our director of operations to open up those conversations, but obviously they'll be district wide. Yeah, we don't have a start date for that yet, but sooner than later.
Very good. And then it looks like you looked at the where we let the water out just before it reaches Harvey Place Reservoir in terms of wetland placement. And was there a reason why you didn't look below Harvey Place Reservoir and some of our other properties that are already, classified as jurisdictional wetlands? Is that not an option? Could we think of a way to maybe use those as well, or to increase capacity?
You do run into a regulatory issue with using secondary T3 water and adding that to a jurisdictional wetland, right? So that is actually a higher bar of regulatory approval if you are going down that route. The area that we identified, there might be an avenue for a less onerous regulatory process because that area is mapped in the National Wetlands Database. It is mapped as wetland, but it has been created by secondary T3 water, right? So that's why we honed in on that area, because of the potentially more straightforward regulatory process for approval.
But I guess today we're basically grazing those lands, quote unquote jurisdictional wetlands. To me, it seems like an interesting conundrum that we're perhaps facing in that right now we've got cows trampling it and essentially degrading those wetlands, yet we would have an opportunity really to enhance, the functionality of those wetlands if we were to create them and provide more water to them. Anyway.
Enjoy the regulatory process,
Yes.
Brian.
Using that conversation, but it seems like there's a lot more opportunity for wetland conservation.
There could be, and I certainly think that, going further down that path and actually really mapping all of that, just doing field verification of jurisdictional wetlands in those areas, revisiting that and expanding that to other areas, even the area that was identified here. I think that, maybe there's an avenue for other areas to be identified. But I think, one at least rough sort of data point or concept is, you need a couple acres doesn't do anything for you. Something on the order of this 30 acres might buy you a little time, and that might be valuable. What's that?
I'm just thinking bigger than that.
Maybe it's bigger than that, right? But I think that there would need to be a separate feasibility analysis of constructive wetlands in that area and the regulatory process to make that happen.
Well, I appreciate you considering it,
Yeah.
including it.
Absolutely.
And I think an important point about it is what we had 5 kind of enhancements that we looked at.
Right.
And there were 3 that there were basically red flags that they weren't going to be feasible or result in a solution that was helpful to us. And so the constructed wetlands and the additional energy recovery on the sea line are the two that seem like, they have some promise. And so, at the strategic plan level, that's kind of as far as we take it. And,
Right.
If there's a reason to, investigate those further, we can always do that.
Yeah, interesting conclusion. I'm glad we went through this because, people come up with all kinds of ideas and now we have a document that says we looked at everything. And the alternatives 4 through 7, I guess all the money is in pipes, right? That's where the hundreds of millions come in.
So for 6A and 6B, much of the cost is in a high level of treatment because of water quality requirements. And when we looked at sort of the highest level of nutrient removal, industry standard highest level of nutrient removal, with the exception of not including the reverse osmosis process, which results in a waste product that you don't have an option for disposing of, right? So that's a high level of nutrient removal and other processes that are in those alternatives. So that's a chunk of the cost, and then as well as that distribution to get to those locations of discharge.
Would that facility, was it envisioned to occur here or down in Nevada somewhere?
In the nutrient removal process?
I guess I have the sense that you were looking to possibly treat to potable standards.
So that is in 6C, right? And in that case, we were looking at the district producing their existing secondary effluent and then a potable reuse facility that would be located in Nevada. So you'd be supplying the supply water to the potable reuse facility. And that's a different process, right?
Absolutely.
Right, and then, but interestingly, that doesn't require the level of nutrient removal that 4, 6A, and 6B do. You just have very stringent water quality standards and downstream water quality standards that drive that treatment process to a high cost.
Do we know whether, I'm thinking on the end user end, at the farms and ranches down there, I guess technically the water's used on the farming aspect of the ranch. Is there any kind of an end user master plan? Does Alpine County have something, or does the watershed district have something? Have they plugged our water supply into some kind of a sub-regional water management plan?
Well, it is plugged in terms of, it is part of, in a sense, the adjudication of the Carson River, right? Because there's tailwater that comes off of those parcels that are irrigated that is then part and incorporated into the adjudication of the Carson River. There are broader studies looking at the various sources of water to in the Carson and to the Carson watershed. That's really the Carson Water Conservation District and primarily that have looked at those sources of water. The interesting with these alternatives, this isn't new water that's being provided, right? And so it's, and I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but, the idea of water need in the Carson River watershed is being a driver for recycled water to any of these stream locations. It's limited by that adjudication, and it's also limited by the legal and regulatory construct of a number of past acts, right, that really say that this isn't new, that if you just do something with this water in the Carson watershed, it's not a new water supply. There's no new water right that would be associated with it. So it's there now, and it would be available for use if you put it in a different location as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess
that's what you're getting.
Where I was coming from is you had a box that popped up, triggers. and it was continued use in Alpine County or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondering, what is the risk of that trigger? Is the water highly valuable, needed? Is it a fundamental part of their water budget? Or are they just pouring it on their land for good of us? You know, what is the risk of that trigger?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, so the ranchers that get water from us, they also have water rights off the Carson River, and like in the spring, they're getting water from there. Later on, it goes into like a rotation where they get water every other week. Right now, they wouldn't be getting any water off the Carson River, so this is when the recycled water is extremely valuable for those ranchers. So it really is supplementing their fresh water rights, and it really allows their operation to kind of go through the end of the summer. So I would say this recycled water for these ranchers is extremely valuable for their operation.
Okay. So the risk of that trigger, I guess, is pretty low. Right? If I'm understanding the use of the word trigger.
I'm assuming, if they are so desired to renew their contracts, then yes, right? I suppose there could be ranchers that don't want to do that activity anymore, right? And so then maybe it's not valuable, right, anymore.
But I would still say, as you look at this, look at these numbers. Like I could build you a golf course community for cheaper than these numbers, right? Like what are we talking about? Like the idea you go through these exaggerated measures instead of buying more land and treating your water yourself. No, you buy the ranches yourself and distribute the water onto yourself. Buying the ranches would be way cheaper than all of these, like 2 of these options, right? Three of these options considering the existing system, right? And so that's how I look at the problem. $300 million to move your water, like is no, impossible. Like it's just not worth the value. You could get more asset and more wealth for STPUD as an entity and more opportunity. Through land acquisition opposed to these exaggerated regulatory or kind of pumping exercises. So I think that would be where I would go if that trigger was ever to be pulled. And we would know well in advance to come to our own solution that benefits us.
Obviously, I haven't seen the strategic plan, but I'm just curious to what extent did you get into, I mean, I guess it's kind of related to what you were talking about, just demand forecast, like Carson Valley, since I've been in Tahoe, is basically exploded in terms of population. I can imagine that has quite a big demand on water resources. Just to what extent do they have the capacity to fill that demand, I guess, today and out 30, 40, 50 years? Do we have any kind of numbers in the strategic plan related to that?
We don't have numbers on those, the demand projected out. We were looking, for areas in the Carson Valley, we were looking at, areas that would use this recycled water now, right, as is, right? But the idea, with the plan being longer term, and the idea of those, of the decision tools, is that you could look at those. You can redo this evaluation, right? The district will have the alternatives evaluation tool, so you could look at this under a future condition and say, well, now I actually have a significant demand for water, for, let's just say, a potable water supply in Nevada, like in the Gardnerville Ranchos area. And in that scenario, I don't actually think this $319 million, that's the potable reuse treatment facility and the conveyance pipeline. And I think if someone wants that water, they're doing the potable reuse treatment facility.
Yeah, they build it. Yeah, I'm just trying to get it. Like for me, I'm trying to value this water in some way because right now we're not even getting cost recovery on our conveyance.
That's right.
To it. And so I guess for me, I'm like, minimally want to get cost recovery on that.
Right.
And I just just trying to think out into the future. What does that look like?
Right. So certainly a trigger to contemplate would be, a driver to do something other than what's being done today. A trigger can also be an opportunity, right? And that could be, well, there are some areas in the Carson Valley, some that want a certain quality of water, right? And then, hopefully we've covered all the options with respect to treatment and conveyance, right? We've at least bracketed those options. And you could look at, then take a fresh look at these alternatives, rank alternatives relative to each other, given, and they would come out differently. Like if you have a different demand or driver for water, then that alternative may rise higher, right, relative to the others. And at that point, you're also revisiting costs and cost sharing and those kinds of opportunities. Yeah.
Any other questions? Really appreciate the presentation. I'm glad the work's coming to an end. We've been at it a long time. So, good work. Thank you. Good work.
Thanks for your time. Should I close this?
All right. Let's move to item 7A. Mark Silas.
Good afternoon, Board. Mark Silas, Water Resources Manager. And so it's been about a month since I was here last to talk about the Water Supply Master Plan, and so I will give you just a brief refresher on that. And so the purpose of the Water Supply Master Plan is to provide a 50-year blueprint for the district to meet its water demands. We're proposing that it's completed in 3 phases, and so phase 1 is what I'm seeking approval from the board for today, and that involves estimation of future water demands and identification of supply and distribution vulnerabilities under those demands. We'll have 4 potential water supply portfolios that we'll develop to address these vulnerabilities. Then we'll move into phase 2. Phase 2 will be a separate task order. It'll involve the evaluation of our water supply plans and selection of a preferred alternative from those. And then phase 3 will involve the finalization of that plan and the completion of any required environmental documentation and compliance. And so back at the August 15th meeting, the board postponed decision on task order number 33 for phase 1 of the Water Supply Master Plan with Corolla due to concerns over a perceived conflict of interest with the proposed project manager who had recently departed from the district. Today, I'm again seeking authorization to execute task order number 33 with Corolla for phase 1. The scope of services remains unchanged from the August 15th meeting, except for the replacement of the previous project manager with Dr. Elisa Garvey, who just spoke on the recycled water strategic plan. Too many plans here. Dr. Garvey is an environmental engineer with extensive experience in water resources, master planning, and water treatment, and also gives great presentations. And so the board also raised concerns about the proposed environmental review process for subsequent task orders. So you remember before we gave the whole overview of the water supply master plan process. And to address these concerns, staff will collaborate with the consultant to develop an appropriate environmental review strategy following phase 2. And so that would be presented to the board for approval in October 2025 when we seek approval for phase 3 of the water supply master plan. And so before I read the requested item, do you have any questions?
I should have asked this question last time, but on the recycled master plan, it looks like it's coming back in November for board adoption. Did we do any kind of an environmental document?
It's a strategic plan. So the recycled water plan we've been working on is a strategic plan, and so there's no specific project, no specific actions coming out of it. Whereas the water supply is a master plan, it'll take a deeper dive into the development of projects and provide us a path forward for things like property acquisition and development of very specific improvements. That makes sense. So there was no environmental documentation required for the recycled water, but there may be for the water supply.
To be determined, right?
To be determined.
Okay.
Phase 3.
Yeah, it's determined that all of the capital improvement work that's recommended from the water supply master plan can be done under CADX, and we'll do it under CADX, and it won't require extensive documentation. And so that would be something that would be determined when we take task order 3 to you guys.
Sounds good. All right. Any other questions, board members?
Yeah, thanks for addressing the concerns.
No, I guess for me, just anticipating checking as part of the ops committee meetings, and so we can come back and keep you posted on what's going on.
Sounds good. All right, but somebody like, actually, Mark, what's your desired motion on this?
Number one, approve the proposed scope of work with Corolla Consultants for phase 1 of the district's water supply master plan. And 2, authorize the general manager to execute task order number 33 with Corolla Consultants in the amount of $229,983.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. I don't think we're going to have any more discussion, so let's just call the question.
He was planning to leave at 3 p.m.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure the record reflected that.
So he didn't know the time.
Okay, that motion passes unanimous with the exception of next one.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to 7B. Cliff.
Good afternoon. Asking today for direction on buying a new vehicle with valve turning equipment and a vacuum unit to offset valve turning exercise that we're starting up for the district here. Total cost is going to be $199, and the unit itself was what was that? $98,000.
Board members, any questions for Cliff?
No, just add some more to Cliff's presentation, that this was brought to the Ops Committee and we discussed it, and both Nick and I know you can speak for yourself, but we thought it's an appropriate purchase, and so we support the purchase.
Sure. All right. What's your desired action?
I would like to have the board approve the purchase from MME of vehicle-mounted valve turning unit and vacuum unit, which will be supplied on a Ford F-550 cabin chassis with a flatbed. What's nice about this unit is it's removable, so during the winter times, if we need a flatbed or any other time, we can probably use the truck. So I'd like to approve the purchase from MME in an amount of $199. Excuse me. $199,861.06, and this is a Sourcewell bid, so everything's been all pre-bid and ready to go.
You see like 1.5% on it or something like that?
Yeah, that was just for the truck.
Okay. And just to note that the other thing we talked about, just in anticipation of Nick Exline comments, is that the technology for having some kind of alternative EV truck type setup was just not available at this time. So
I'll move the action.
Second.
Move and second. Call the question. Not working. How about a voice vote?
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Director Sheehan, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Director Rompus, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
President Pearson, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Director Hazen, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous with the absence of Nick Exline.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 8, standing ad hoc committees. Let's start with you, John, right? Yeah.
2 meetings. I'll just cover the System Efficiency and Sustainability Committee. I'll let Nick cover the Ops Committee. I might be able to fill in. So yesterday we met and we got an update on the solar facility in terms of its progress. It looks like we're getting all the BMPs and everything installed right over here and getting ready for the timber harvesting. Everything that they've suggested is that we're on schedule to get the harvesting done this year, and then additional site prep's going to probably play out in spring. And then we also had a conversation around how to deal with some of these impending climate action vulnerability assessments and local hazard mitigation planning efforts, and how do we accomplish those things. And I think we provided Julie with some suggestions on taking advantage of our existing kind of suite of things that we do today and trying to package those in a way that helps to satisfy the needs of those respective efforts. So I think there's a lot of stuff we have going on today, and staff could provide some really valuable input on both of those efforts. Both of those things are elements that I think not only can inform our capital improvement program, but also provide us opportunities for additional grant funding. So, yeah. Anything else on that from Shelley? No? Ops?
No, go ahead.
You want to do ops?
Go ahead.
No, you got it.
All right. Well, I mean, in operations, I think Adrian's hitting stride during those meetings, and it's always good to have operations and engineering, you know, together. I think the water and sewer side with operations and engineering, I think, is good to just have better visibility on what's going on and what our staff is jumping on and facing, which is a lot. You know, I think I'm always impressed. We always get the reports on kind of what's going on out there in the community, and I'm always impressed at how we jump on things, take care of it in such a professional manner and just so efficiently and effectively. So, you know, I just want to give that shout out to our staff on an ongoing basis. And, you know, we typically went through the updates, and I think in ops we like to see some of these items that come, you know, ahead of time before the board come to ops for a discussion. And the vehicle purchase is a good example. You know, we're seeing action, and, you know, our valve turning, our valve exercising program that we're starting to ramp up on, and now getting some equipment to make that more efficient. So a good example of, you know, putting some things that we've talked about in for a long time into motion. So great to hear about that. And then Shane can add on some other ops items if you want. But wanted to hop over to the El Dorado Water Agency. We had the meeting up here this month, which was great, the one a year. Thanks, Shelley, for covering me the previous meeting. Shelley, sorry. And,
it's okay.
Yeah, it's close.
Yeah. It happens all the time.
So it was an interesting introduction to that organization. So I definitely look forward to representing the district with that agency and really kind of figuring out how we can strategically position ourselves to enhance, you know, our activity, not our activity, but maybe our success in receiving funding and investment in the Tahoe Basin that better maybe reflect, you know, what we're putting in and what our population's putting in terms of property tax. So I'm pretty vested in that. Thanks, Dave, for representing the district well over the years. And I thought it was a very strategic time that you pointed out where, you know, they're entering their master planning process for the county as a whole. And I think it's good timing. Here we're doing all of our planning efforts, just talking to staff in the ops meeting about, you know, how we can make sure we're syncing up what we're coming up with in our planning documents with that countywide planning effort. So looking forward to it.
I actually attended that meeting as well as a spectator, and Nick represented us very well.
All right, very good. Let's go to board member reports. Anything else? All right. Let's go to staff and attorney reports. Anything?
Shelley has a short one.
Okay.
Shelley Thompson, Director of Public and Legislative Affairs. I have some good news to share that is right off the press. So this afternoon, the House Committee on Natural Resources approved the Lake Tahoe Reauthorization Act. Lake Tahoe Restoration, sorry, it's so long, Reauthorization Act. So, yes, so there was unanimous consent, which is awesome, and this will help expedite the voting process when it goes to the House of Representatives. Congressman Kiley, who brought this bill on the House side, to the committee, and he's hoping to bring the bill to the House floor within the next 2 weeks. That's how long we're in session. And the good news is when this went to the Senate back in July, it was approved unanimously. So fingers crossed that we can get it to the House in the next week or so, and that it will get approval and go to the President's desk for signature. So this is a really crucial piece of legislation. It's really the cornerstone for federal investments for Tahoe's environment. We've certainly benefited from it with funding for water for fire infrastructure. So very excited to, we're not there yet. We're on the final stretch and very hopeful. Some not as great news on the state side. We had a bill this year that was SB 1088. It's what Alvarado Gill authored for us that would expand a grant program under Cal OES for water for fire suppression infrastructure. Last year we had a very similar bill. It passed out of both the Assembly and the Senate, and it was the governor who shot it down because of a lack of funding mechanism. This year we've got the funding mechanism in the climate bond. We're so excited for our bill, and politics got in the way. So a few days before the decision was made, our senator switched political parties. She went from being a Democrat to a Republican, and almost all of her bills were struck. Most of her bills were struck down after that move. So I think that, unfortunately, some great policy didn't move forward because of politics, but we're going back to sharpen our pencils and figure out if that climate bond does pass, what is the right mechanism to get funding out to water districts in high fire areas that have issues like ours where we have undersized water infrastructure. So good and bad all at the same time. Any questions?
Good job on your work on the reauthorization of Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, and keep on pushing on California. I know that there's other budget issues going on in California right now, so it's not you or her or you're looking to save money up all over the place. So.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shelley. I guess, Shelley, before you go, on the Murray's bill that got struck down, is there another senator that can pick that up, a Democrat?
That's what we're looking to do. And, you know, hindsight's 20/20 because last time it got passed out of the Assembly and the Senate, we didn't do a co-author. But there's other areas of the states that have similar issues to us. So we're we have relationships with other allies that we're trying to figure out, are we going to do another bill next session? Are we going to pursue a different route? Yes, we do. We talked to a lot of folks in Sacramento about this and have a lot of support. Like the Santa Cruz area has a lot of champions for us.
Very good. Any other questions for her? Thanks, Shelley. Any other reports under this, Paul? No. Okay. Let's go to the GM report then.
Saving my comments for closed session today.
Very good. With that, looks like notice of past and future meetings is in the agenda packet. And with that, we're going to go into closed session.
Is there going to be a board action about general manager salary?
Yeah.
You have to be in open session.
I got it.
We're a closed session, and there's nothing to report. So let's go on item 14.
Okay. So what I have for you this afternoon is we're looking for approval of the general manager's salary for the 24-25 contract year. So as you all know, the board recently met with Paul Hughes, general manager, to conduct the annual performance evaluation. And part of the DM contract states that on an annual basis, the general manager will be eligible for a merit increase to the next step in the salary range as approved by the board and based on satisfactory performance. And in this case, the next step in the salary range is step B of the management salary schedule. So the
before I go over the requested board action, are there any questions?
What's your desired action?
Approve the general manager's salary for the 2024-2025 contract year effective August 15th, 2024.
So moved.
Second, and let's call the question.
Director Sheehan, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
Director Rosa?
Yes.
President Peterson?
Yes.
Director Hayman?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimous, with the option for Director X.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. All right, with that, looks like we have no other business today, so we are adjourned.